What is up, my ducks and drakes? Welcome to the Crowded Lake, and today we're going to be reading Chapter 1 of A Lesson in Practicality by ResidentAnchor on Wattpad. If you'd like to support the fic or the author, do so in the description below. That will link to the book and to the author. Who would have thought? You could also use the Google form below to request fics for the future. Due to some plans that I have, this form will be closing in the next 2 weeks. So if you want me to read anything, submit it in the next 2 weeks. Otherwise, forever hold your peace. With that being said, here's Chapter 1, Hypothesis and Conjecture. It had been roughly 2 weeks since they had that sat down and talked. Logan claimed he observed everything by being home the most. He worked part-time at a bookstore and spent the rest of his time on his computer doing some kind of coding and debugging most of the time. He tried explaining, but he had a tendency to go off on tangents, and they had gotten off topic quickly. Logan promised that he didn't use his powers, not even for simple things if he could help it. He calmed them down, promising he had never read their minds since they had moved in, and promised he did not have plans to do so in the future. Mostly to settle down Virgil, who seemed the most anxious and upset at the news of his ability. Patton admitted he never really used his at all until he had moved out a few years ago, but mostly just made 1 or 2 copies to help with chores or to keep him company when things got too quiet. He had mentioned he was usually careful until his slip-up with Virgil. Roman had a problem with using his subconsciously and not being aware of it. His phone never seemed to lose charge, and when he was using it sometimes he forgot to plug things in before using them. He also had the problem of constantly being a source of static shock and static cling. Nothing too bad, but after admitting this, Virgil had bought a pack of balloons, and Roman had woken up to a dozen balloons clung to him and a snickering Virgil taking photos. Virgil had stated he never used his powers out of fear of something going wrong, but if he was about to miss a bus or a train or was about to be late for an appointment, he didn't see the harm in stopping time for a bit so he didn't have to worry. That got a chuckle out of Roman, who was amused by the prospect of such a strong power being used to help Virgil get to work on time at the craft store in case he slept in too late. With the secrets out in the open, they seemed to be more relaxed around each other, becoming closer friends, and then the 3 or so months they had lived together. Patton could be found cleaning the living room or cooking while he was also at work as a library assistant, a job he found ironic Logan didn't have. Organizing catalogs and looking with the computers was up his alley, but Logan much preferred the time he had at home working on small projects and reading, though he never explained what he was ever doing past the time they had asked. They were too afraid of the confusing answer that they might get again. Although Patton's favorite part of the job was when students would come in from school or when they had nights where he and the librarian read children's books to the younger kids. Roman had admitted he had been laid off from a comfy desk job about a year or so ago and hadn't found a decent work since, resorting in an embarrassing job he refused to talk about besides venting about co-workers with a few details as possible. All they knew was he worked at the local theater, and his other job involved him acting as well, though those were all the details he ever gave. Weeknights, where everything lined up and they could gather around and talk, happened once in a while, but instead of hiding away, they quickly became family nights, as Patton called them. They would sit around and talk, just relaxing and having dinner. Patton had the most experience cooking something that hadn't been pre-frozen, and had started teaching them the basics and having them explore the world outside of pizza and pasta. Currently gathered in the living room, Patton and Roman shared the couch. Logan sat in the recliner with a book currently open but placed face down onto the armrest, and Virgil sat on the floor between the coffee table and the small TV they had. Dinner had been loud, and they all ventured over to the living room some time ago. Roman pulled out a bottle of wine he had gotten as a housewarming gift and had shared it, but only Virgil had taken up the offer. It was cheap, and Virgil was nursing it, mostly just swirling it around in a cheap glass he had. Roman used an actual wine glass that only one they had owned. I'm telling you, I could freeze time and follow you, you'd never know. Roman huffed, leaning back on the couch and swirling his glass. I just don't want you distracting me while I work. Besides, you wouldn't dare. I'd be a massive waste of your... Roman was caught off guard, and Virgil smirked at him. I was going to say energy. Wipe that smile off your face. He quickly took a swig from his glass and glanced away, nearly emptying it in the process. Sure you were. Virgil mumbled into his glass and took a sip, the glass still nearly full. Now, kids, no need to fight, Patton spoke in a joking manner. But, Dad, Virgil whined mockingly, smiling up at Patton as he smirked. Patton smiled and leaned forward. No need to whine, kiddo. Patton, please, Logan huffed. Your humor leaves much to be desired. Virgil leaned forward and put down his glass on the table, using a coaster so Logan didn't lecture him on the importance of coasters again. I don't know. He's teaching us to cook, and he speaks in dad jokes. Virgil pushed off the ground. Seemed like he's a dad of the house to me. Stretching, Virgil made his way across the room. I work in the morning. I'm gonna hit the hay. Roman scoffed and turned towards his retreating roommate. It's a waste of wine if you don't actually drink it. Tell your coworker to give you better wine next time. Roman reached forward and finished his wine, grabbing Virgil's and heading towards the kitchen. I'll do the dishes tonight, Patton, since you and Virgil cooked dinner. Logan picked up his book and made his way to the back of the apartment to his room. I have a project to finish, so I'm afraid I will be heading out as well. Wait! Patton stood up and Logan turned back, book half raised to his face already. I had a question. Patton stuck his hands in his pockets and shuffled in his spot. Do you think maybe... Logan adjusted his glasses and turned to completely face his slightly younger roommate. Patton, we have gotten closer these last few weeks. If you are bothered by something, I will hear you out. Patton smiled and took a step closer. Do you think your mind-reading ability is due to your psychic whatever, or the other way around? Psychosis, Patton. It is referred to as telekinesis, if that helps you. Logan placed his finger in his book and closed it to keep his spot, tucking it under his arm. This is an absolute observation, although. Through my personal experiences and research, I believe you may be correct. Patton perked up. I am? Logan nodded, causing his roommate to smile and jump, clapping his hands. I knew it! Oh, that helps me prove my theory more. See, I think our powers have a secondary effect. I didn't really realize until last week when we were talking. Oh? Logan's eyebrows shot up in shock. Well, that is a possibility I haven't given much thought. I would love to talk more in depth about this. You work late tomorrow, correct? Perhaps we can talk during lunch before you leave? I have to prepare for the school field trip the next morning, so I'm closing, yeah. We can make lunch together. Oh, this is so exciting. Thanks, Logan. Patton waved and headed the opposite direction towards his own room. Good night. Logan watched Patton walk away and smiled, making his way through the kitchen towards his room. Roman wished him good night as well, hands covered in soap. When Logan got to his room, he looked around at the small desk and bed that occupied his living space. There wasn't much room for anything else, his closet filled with books and journals that he had filled, and he glanced down at the science fiction novel he had been reading before dinner. Normally he would be done with it by now, but he was quickly finding the companionship of his new roommates much more enjoyable than his love for reading had been. The next morning had brought a calmer energy to the apartment. Logan had stayed up slightly later than he normally would due to the social gathering that had distracted him the night before. Though ever punctual, he had gotten up as early as he normally would, happy to find Virgil had already made a pot of coffee on his way to work. He poured himself a cup, greeting Virgil, who mumbled back, already taking a big swig of his own coffee. Virgil didn't drink coffee often. He said it made him too jittery. But earlier shifts made it a requirement due to the late nights he always had at the computer. Logan looked at the clock and saw it was just past 8 a.m. I take it in your state? You're opening the store today, Virgil? A groan was his answer as his roommate tilted his head back and finished his coffee. The only people who need yarn at 9 a.m. are old ladies with nothing better to do. He made his way over to the sink to rinse out his mug. Thank goodness I stocked the store. I couldn't deal with people this early. Virgil placed his clean mug on the drying rack they had and walked back to his room to get dressed. Not long after he exited his room, he made his way through the kitchen again. Do me a favor. If Patton asks, I ate breakfast. He reached into a bowl of fruit and grabbed an apple and pulled his hood of his hoodie up. See ya. Logan checked the time again, not surprised his roommate was leaving early for work. Virgil had a tendency to worry about most things, so he usually was at work super early, checking things multiple times and stressing over outcomes he wasn't prepared for. He had calmed down more than when he had first arrived, only arriving late to avoid confrontation with others. Any improvement was a good improvement, Logan reminded him. It wasn't much later that Patton showed up, and Logan knew Roman wasn't too far behind. He never slept in, claiming it was bad to oversleep and would ruin the whole point of beauty sleep. Soon after, Roman was off to the theater to work on another possible show before heading out to his actual job afterward, leaving Logan and Patton alone. They settled back into the living room, Patton taking his usual spot at one end of the couch and Logan taking his recliner. Patton pulled out a few pieces of paper he had, covered in words and scribbled notes. So, I did a lot of research trying to figure this stuff out. He sat closer and reached his notes out for Logan to take. I had a few theories, so it's kind of messy because I just wrote things down as I had ideas, but Logan looked up and Patton froze, looking down at the table. Accompanied by a slight buzzing noise, Patton's phone was lit up and vibrating across it. Oh, I have to take this. Sorry, Logan. Patton shut up and grabbed his phone, pressing it to his ear. Hi, Mom. Yeah, it's me. Logan looked back down at the notes, trying to find where they actually had started. Distracted by the flowers that Patton had also doodled in the margins, it seemed Patton was just starting to write things down that he learned before he followed a single thought process, which still went a couple different ways. Patton walked back in the room, pocketing his phone and sitting down. Logan could tell he didn't carry the same energy as he did before the phone call, but didn't press the matter. He wasn't jumping to share his personal life either. It seemed you started wondering the correlation of your abilities with outside circumstances and trying to make connections. Logan looked up at Patton, who stared back, confused. You try to find similarities between your powers and things that happen that don't seem related. Oh, yeah, that's what I was doing. Patton scooted in closer. See, I was wondering, after Roman got all those balloons stuck to him, if our powers had side effects. That is an interesting observation. Logan flipped through the notes. You seem to have written something here about your own abilities. Patton sat up straight, hands already moving before he spoke. When I make my little Patton pals, I can kind of feel how they feel, you know? Patton paused, struggling for the right words. Like, if they're in another room and they feel strongly about something, I can feel that. But I don't really understand why until after we become one again. Logan nodded, motioning for Patton to continue. Oh, okay, so last week I had started wondering if I had side effects to my abilities. Then I started noticing that I could feel nervousness, but none of my little buddies were out. Then I noticed it was coming from Virgil. Patton looked up, full of excitement. He was worried about something that happened at work, and I got him to talk about it. I mentioned me feeling the emotions of the copies I make, and gosh, I need a better word for them. Patton? Right. Sorry. Patton smiled sheepishly. Anyway, Virgil said it was called being an empath. I think that I've never made my buddies appear with other people around. I had never noticed. Patton motioned to his notes. I started wondering if Roman and Virgil had second to lesser abilities as well. Besides, Roman being so positively attractive. Patton winked, and it took Logan a second before realizing it was another dad joke of his. What do you think? Logan flipped through the notes again, seeing the word empath scribbled and underlined on the side and reading the paragraph next to it. I must say, Patton, your note-taking skills are lacking, but you have a solid hypothesis. This could be looked further into. Patton shot out of his seat in excitement. Really? I did good? Logan put down the notes and smiled. Yes, Patton, you did good. Although it would be, I did well. I'm rather impressed. I don't know what I would have noticed. I'm sure you would have noticed eventually. Patton sat back down, still excited about his discovery. We only just all started exploring what we could really do, but you seem to have a good hold on yours. Logan placed the papers down, fixing his glasses. Well, I think this discussion should be continued with the others when they get home, so we may further prove our hypothesis. Patton gathered his notes with a gleeful smile on his face. I've been able to figure out mine for the most part before moving in. Maybe we can help the others figure out their own if they wanted. Logan stood up and Patton followed soon. If they express interest in learning more about their abilities, a safe and supervised environment would be the best choice. Now how about we cook something up for lunch before Virgil gets home? You want to cook with me? Patton turned back and ran to his room. I'd love to. Let me put these back. It was just around 2 p.m. when Virgil got home, having just missed Patton as he headed towards the library. These moments used to be some of Virgil's favorites. Logan was in the room, and the place was emptied and quiet. He could put on a show or music for background noise and just relax without any worries. As he sat on the couch, he was aware of how much he had already preferred the noise of laughter and banter from his roommates. Roman had gotten home around 4 after a rough day. The theater was doing auditions on a day he couldn't get out of his dreaded job, and he wasn't sure if he'd be able to audition, let alone be in the play if he could. Then he got the short end of the straw at his job. He worked in a themed restaurant as an actor who also waited tables. Not the most fulfilling job, but until then, he looked for jobs everywhere while performing for customers, enjoying what he can. Unfortunately, there was a worse part of the job, the mascot. They drew straws to see who got stuck in the front of the store to get customers, where most people ignored him or made fun of him. He was good at banter, but some days people just gotta be mean. Today, Roman drew the short straw. He made it up the flights of stairs to his apartment and greeted by Virgil, sitting on the couch, watching something on TV on his phone. Roman made no hesitation to the cheap wine they had the night before and poured himself a generous glass, not being as low as it was the night before. He finished it before pouring a second and making his way to the living room. Watching anything interesting? Not really. Virgil finally looked up for the first time. Whoa, bad day. Roman huffed and pulled his hair back and let out a frustrated sigh. That's a yes. Roman fell back against the couch without a word, not having the energy to talk. Silence fell between the two before Roman took another big swig. Slow down there, buddy. You're gonna get a headache drinking cheap crud like that too fast. How did I go from a nice, cushy desk job to this in less than a year? Roman rubbed his face with his hand. He squeezed his eyes shut and sighed, dropping his hand into his lap. If I have one more thing thrown at me, I will lose it. No, you won't. You're too good at that. You're like a prince straight out of a Disney movie. Roman smirked for a second and finished his glass, putting it down. Thanks, Maleficent. I appreciate that. No prob, Prince Philip. Virgil turned back to his phone and started scrolling. Roman took out his phone and pressed the home button, only to be greeted by a dark screen. Oh, fantastic, he muttered. Virgil looked over and looked at Roman's phone. Looks like the battery died. Roman scoffed and held a hand to his chest, offended. My batteries don't just die, Virgil. Maybe you need a charge, Princey. Roman took his head and lifted his hand, waiting for the small blue light of electricity to appear around his hand. He never tried creating more than just the small charge on his hand for charging various electronics, for which he had mastered. After a second, when nothing happened, he flicked his hand and looked down at it. That's rather odd. Looks like someone lost their spark, Virgil nudged Roman, who looked up at him in confusion. You okay? You seem lost. I can't make electricity. Roman tried again, only to be greeted with the same outcome. That's so strange. This has never happened before. Never say never. Roman glared at Virgil, who put his phone down. Sorry, here, let me see your phone. Roman handed it over, and Virgil held down the power button. The screen lit up for a second before dying again. Yeah, it's out of juice. He handed it back over. How do you usually do that? I just sort of have this fuzzy feeling, and I focus on that, and it happens. Roman rubbed his chest as to specify where the fuzzy feeling was coming from. It's kind of fuzzier than normal now. Roman tried again, closing his eyes, really focusing. This time, a small blue spark formed before fizzling out. Why is this so hard? Well, when's the last time you used it? I used it before I got home. My battery wasn't dead, and I checked my phone while walking up the stairs. So, the battery finally fizzled out? Roman shook his head. It could have no battery, but as long as it's touching me, it'll stay on and keep its charge. Virgil looked at Roman, who stared down in dismay at his phone. He looked at his phone, then sat up. Maybe... Could it be the wine? What? Roman looked at his now empty glass of wine. You think the wine shorted me out? Shorted you and your phone out, yeah. The charge could have come from your brain, and alcohol dampened it. Roman fell back on the couch. Great, my super weakness is alcohol. Fantastic. That's rather interesting. Roman looked over at Logan, who walked into the living room, a book and pen in his hand. You say you short-circuited after the wine? He opened the book and stared, writing down something. That is something we need to test as well. Virgil sat up straight on the couch. You saying we should get different types of alcohol and see what short circuits Princey out? Well, that is a viable test we could run. I'm so in. A quick trip to the store, and Logan had already begun to regret his decision. They made their way up to the stairs, headed for the rooftop of the apartment building. The colder weather had made it a perfect place where they weren't likely to be bothered. Roman pushed open the door with Virgil trailing, both carrying the majority of the bags up to the roof, while Logan carried one of his journals firmly in a hand. All right, Roman. Are you still under the effects of the wine from earlier? Logan placed his bag down with the others on the only table and opened his journal midway through. Roman took a step back and held out his hand, a surge of blue sparks jumping from between his fingers. All good now. Great. Virgil handed out a can of beer to Roman, holding on to his own. Now drink up. Logan started scribbling in his journal, rereading what was on the page afterwards. Yes, I'd like to finish early. I work in the morning. Roman looked down at the can and cracked it open. I feel like I'm going back to college. You're not much older than me. Stop acting like college was forever ago. I'm older than all of you, Logan ran out, pulling out the cups from one of the bags. I'll be observing and taking notes as we go along. Roman looked over at Virgil and scowled. So why are you drinking? I thought you avoided the stuff. No, I avoid caffeine. Besides, you bought it all. Who am I to pass up a little bit of free booze? Roman rolled his eyes and grimaced into the can, beer not being a choice he had ever picked when he did choose to indulge, which wasn't often. Roman finished his can quicker than he would have liked and created a spark like before with no issues. Logan jotted down the discovery in his book, and Virgil brought out 2 bottles. Champagne or whiskey? Roman grabbed the champagne, giving Virgil the opportunity to open the whiskey himself. This is stupid. What's the point if I never drink? Virgil nudged him playfully, pouring a small amount into the cups they purchased. Come on, Roman. It's for science. I thought you wanted to know how this stuff worked. Roman was still sober enough to keep his dignity as he sloshed some of the drink into a cup before downing it quickly. I do. I'd love to know how my powers work, don't you? He poured himself another before capping the bottle. Virgil shrugged and looked off the rooftop out into the city, though he couldn't see much. Not really. Sure, there's stuff I don't understand, but if I never used them, then there's no worry, right? I thought you did use your powers sometimes. I can never tell. It's not like I can see stopped time. Roman looked over at the city, with Virgil sipping at his second cup. You're not even a little curious? Never lost control of your powers? Looking over at Virgil gave Roman a better answer than words could. The slightly younger roommate had started glaring out onto the skyline before quickly tossing his head back and finishing the drink. Come on, Roman, light it up. He turned away and put down his cup, jumping and sitting on the table. Roman dropped the topic and finished his drink, handing the cup to Virgil, who placed it beside his own. Roman held out a hand and once again focused on that feeling, only for his hand to look as normal as ever. Interesting. It seems like we have the same physical outcome as the wine. Logan took a step forward, quickly glancing down at his journal. Roman, how do you feel now? Still too sober for this. Roman shook his head, and tried again, closing his eyes with a grimace and focusing harder. It's like the fuzziness is spread around more, and I can't get a good grip on it. A spark shot out of his hand, and he dropped it immediately, holding his head. That was hard, and now I have a headache. Roman leaned back against the wall of the roof and looked up at Virgil. This was a bad idea. Why did I think this would be a good idea? Logan took a few of the cups and placed them in a small pyramid stack. Don't worry, Roman. I believe the more inbred you become, the less focus you have, which in turn means less control over the generation of your magnetic charge. The type of alcohol may increase the speed this happens, but I do not believe the type matters. So if he gets too tipsy and can't generate a charge... Virgil hopped off the table. Tough luck, Sparky. Logan cleared off the rest of the table, placing the bags on the ground. Roman, you also wish to learn how to be in control of your powers more, did you not? If you would, I would like to try something. He pulled out his notebook and flipped back a page from one he had bookmarked. You said you merely had an energy field about you which could be problematic at times. Have you ever tried to disperse any of this energy before? Well, yeah, as a kid. Accidentally made my mom a living magnet for a week once on accident. I usually just try to burn out what I have in small ways. Do you think we could try having you knock over some cups on the table to see if it would affect you? Roman rolled his eyes and spun around. I'm tipsy, calculator watch. Not completely, but enough. He stopped and pointed dramatically at Logan. I just told you I can't create anything while like this. Then I apologize for this in advance. Logan adjusted his glasses, a quick flash of blue light passing over his eyes before he looked up. How do you feel now? Roman stood up straight, gathered himself, his brow furrowed in confusion, then looked up in shock. Did you make me sober? Holy hell, you can do that. Virgil laughed, looking between the two. You'd be fun at parties, Lo. Logan brought his gaze onto the youngest roommate. I figured this knowledge would be unsettling for you. Virgil shrugged and crossed his arms. I'm a beer and 2 shots of whiskey into this science lesson. I'm more amused than anything. You could just about outdrink anyone. That is not how it works, but I understand your point. Logan pointed to the cups on the table. Roman, would you like to give it a try? Virgil walked over to Logan, and they both created space between them and Roman's target. Roman looked down at his hands and up at the cups, as if daring them to a challenge. He raised his hands and shot out a bigger bolt than expected, which missed all the cups completely and surprised Roman enough that he pulled his hand back immediately. I didn't know I could do that. You missed, Emperor Palatine. Virgil cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted. Roman stomped his foot in response. I am not a villain! Honestly, I'd rather a superhero. It fits me more, obviously. Whatever you say, Static Shock. Roman hopped, facing the cups once more. This time, he held up a hand and gestured with just a pointer finger and let it loose. The shot missed, but a much smaller bolt shot out this time. Whoa, okay. He looked down at his hands once more. That's too easy. I'm almost afraid if I actually tried to let out as much power as I could. That's why you're practicing, isn't it? Logan took a few steps forward, closing his journal he had just been scrawling in fury a moment before. Pat and I have had a bit to handle on what we could do through time and experience. All I did was be a live-in battery for my parents. Roman flexed his finger and shoved them into his pockets. I do feel a little better, even after a small bolts. Like, I'm not going to shock the next person I touch. Virgil walked up and smirked. About time. I was tired of you passing me in the halls and shocking me. Roman reached out and poked his roommate. A quick flash shocked the younger man, who yelped. Oh, no, I could do that whenever I want. Virgil rubbed his arm and glared at Roman. I'll get you back for that. I think that's enough for tonight. It's already getting too dark to continue. Logan walked over to the table and cleared up the cups, placing them back down into the bag. We could continue another day. For now, we should go see Patton before he begins to worry. Hey, Logan. Would you zap my brain and sober me up if I keep drinking? I have work in the morning. Virgil grabbed a small bottle of whiskey he had been drinking from earlier. Logan looked back up at him and smirked. That is to be seen. He picked up the one bag he brought upstairs and made his way down. Virgil shrugged and took a swig from the bottle. That's not a good idea. That's not even yours. Roman reached for the bottle and Virgil quickly ducked away. You're much more relaxed when you're drinking. Gee, I wonder why. Virgil smirked playfully back at Roman before sticking out his tongue. He then picked up one of the bags he brought upstairs earlier. You can carry the rest, right, Princey? World's already spinning for me, thanks. Roman watched Virgil almost clumsily run across the roof to the door and vanish, looked down at his bags Virgil had left him, and, without a thought, back to how this began. His day was bad, yes, he just wanted to forget about it over a glass of wine. He did not expect a bonding moment on the roof with two of his roommates. Roman picked up the bags and made his way downstairs. Maybe he could convince Logan to leave Virgil as he is, as punishment for making him carry everything back down on his own. Thank you all so much for listening. These chapters are ever so long, so reading them is a little difficult, but I am very happy to be reading such a classic fic in the fandom. I'm gonna be rewatching the animatics, or the videos, the animated ones of this after this, because I'm excited now. Very, very excited. But with that being said, thank you for listening. Please support the author and their work. And, like, Virgil's trying to do something. He's drunk. I don't know. Do your best.